How you doing? This is Andy and Chase from the Andy Scott School of Golf here at Par for Fitness. We're going to talk a little bit about wedge play and the importance of how to really dial this in to see more birdies, hit more shots close in proximity, and a couple of things and items that can help you become an elite wedge player and how to go about it. Number one, I would say the biggest thing that we can do better is hit less loft.
Absolutely.
Less loft equals lower trajectory. Just to give you an idea, when you're trying to throw an object, if you had a ball in your hand and you had a basket in front of you, you would throw that object pretty low and try to get it into the basket. Nobody would throw it as high as they could and try to land it in that basket. Why? Because you have a much better chance of hitting your target. So golf is the same analogy. The lower we can hit the ball, the better chances we are going to be able to hit our distance. So less loft makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
I would say a misconception that I had when I was growing up, I saw a lot of these guys hitting these low shots. And I was like, dang, how are they doing that with like a 58 degree? And I didn't realize they were just using less loft. They were hitting lower shots with less lofted clubs. And I wish I would have known that earlier because it could have really changed my wedge game. Because I was always trying to hit my pitching wedge, sand wedge, gap wedge,
Completely full.
just trying to hit it as full as I could hit it. And I always hit it too high. Occasionally I get one close, but not very often.
Absolutely.
So number one, when we started working on this, we started thinking about how big is your swing compared to a full swing. Talk to them a little bit about the progression that we made.
Well, as a professional, my wedge game took a turn for the better when I stopped hitting completely full wedge shots like Andy used to when he was a kid. And when that mindset changed for me, and I was okay with hitting less loft and a kind of a smoother type swing, that's when my wedge game changed for the better, like I was saying. A more controlled, less lofted swing is going to take the trajectory a lot lower, control the spin a lot better, and eventually put you a lot closer to the pin. Because when it comes to the wedge game, Andy, you think it's a matter of how far or how close?
How close?
How close. That leads to a lot more birdies than being impressed with how far we can hit our wedges. And as a high schooler, an immature high schooler, I was so impressed with how far I could hit my wedges, but I wasn't making that many birdies. And in the end, these are our birdie and scoring chances, is when we get a wedge in our hand. Because I was a big believer in, once I got to college, and I went to Liberty University, one of the best lessons I learned from my college coach was how much I needed to practice my wedges. Because he kind of etched it into my brain. These are your scoring clubs. It's not going to be the 5-iron or 4-irons you make a lot of birdies with. It's going to be when you have your wedges in your hand. So when you get those in your hand, let's take advantage and put those really close.
Absolutely. And I can remember being, even in college, players were like, what'd you hit into number 14, the par 5? And it was all about brag about what wedge you hit in. And not anything about what kind of trajectory did I hit, what kind of shot did I hit.
Or what you make in the hole.
So yeah, exactly. What did you make on the hole?
Right.
So I think you'll definitely see the huge benefit of this once you start working on this. But how do we go about going from a full swing to a wedge swing? Is kind of what me and you worked on a lot.
Absolutely.
That really turned your wedge plays into big opportunities.
Of course.
So the big thing I would say for us is the mentality of full. When you had a full motion mentality, it was a full motion mentality. What's the difference between that and a wedge swing in your mind?
So in my new mentality.
Yes.
For example, I have a 54 degree in my hand right now. Let's say I would have instead of 58 degree. A 58 degree, very full, in the old Chase mindset, would hit it 100 yards if it was full. But after I changed, and talking to Andy, after I changed to our new mindset, we're just going to focus on a nice controlled swing. I would be able to hit every wedge 100 yards. A 54 degree, a 50 degree, a pitching wedge. I would work on all of those wedges, hitting it 100 yards. And that would go, I could do that with any different yardage after I changed my mindset. And that's what turned my wedge game around, because I could hit a lower, flatter type shot into any pin.
Absolutely, and when you were working on the different clubs, that's an excellent drill that we worked on, is hitting different clubs, same distances.
Correct.
What were things that you started to notice in your swing length and forward swing that started to change versus your full motion?
Absolutely, it was so much more abbreviated
Okay.
and controlled.
Okay.
And those two aspects of, I think when you can get those two aspects going with the wedge game, abbreviated and controlled, it's going to equal a lot shorter birdie putts for you, or par, whatever it is.
Absolutely. So I would say what I noticed when I watched the transformation from full to more control is you hit the ball definitely lower, and you had so much more command on your distance control. Now, how did you manage your distance control? Did you come up with a system? Like if you had an 80-yard wedge shot versus 100, how did you manage to hit those different shots? Was it just simply change the club, or you might still use a less lofted club and have a different type of motion?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I came up with a system while I was in Canada with my brother, and I just said, you know, Quade, I really need to figure out a system of how far to take it back with each wedge to hit it a certain distance. So my brother and I brainstormed one night at our host family, and we said, why don't we come up with a system? A lot of people like to do the clock system. I'm going to take it back to 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I'm not a big fan of that. It might be for you, but what I like to do is I like to figure out how far I hit each wedge, going to my belly button, my pec, my shoulder, and full swing. And from there, we wrote those numbers down, and I started studying them. And then on the course, when I could hit a low 100-yard shot, I knew I could get my 50-degree wedge out and take it back to my pec and follow through and hit it exactly 100 yards.
Explain to them what you mean by pec. Do you mean the club head, the hands?
Oh, good. This is good.
Yes.
So it's my hand. It's my hands, not my club head. So if I would take it back to a 50, this is a 54 degree in my hand, and if I wanted to hit this 105 yards, I would take my hands back to my shoulder, just like this. This is a 105 yard shot with this club. Now, if I wanted to hit this club 85 yards, I would take my hands back even with my pec, kind of more in this direction, and I would hit that 85 yards. So that's kind of how the system worked. It all mattered where my hands were in the swing.
So you developed your own little system that helped give you some really good details on how far you're going to hit it.
Correct.
And you figured that out not only with just one wedge, but you kind of explored to find out, hey, I can do it with my pitching wedge, I can do it with my gap, I can do it with my sand.
Every single wedge I had.
So you really started to get some solid details on what they were doing.
Correct.
So the average player, I would say, tends to overswing on their wedges, and they try to get more out of it than they need to. And if you can just learn how to control flight number one with less loft, things are gonna already quickly get better. Like all the lessons I give, I go from a full swinger to somebody, I'm like, okay, I want you to try to hit this pitching wedge 100 yards. Instantly they start hitting it lower and hitting their target, and they're like, that's a lot easier. I'm like, no kidding.
Let's keep doing that.
So that's definitely a format we want to
Sure.
see more often. Now, there are times where you might need to hit it high.
For sure.
So we're not saying that you have to hit it low all the time. But when I watch the players at the Masters or at any PGA event, it's surprising. You'll be surprised how low they hit it, even when they don't necessarily need to hit it low. They might have a low shot going into a front pin because they know it's going to spin and stop.
So, like you said, there are times and places to hit a full high wedge.
Absolutely.
Okay, but it's so rare for me now because I realize how close I can hit those controlled, abbreviated low wedges. The only times I would hit a high, full wedge nowadays is a front pin.
Right.
A front pin, you obviously got to hit a little higher and maybe spin it or bring it in a little softer. And that's the only time I'm going to be hitting a full wedge now. It used to be I hit a full wedge all the time. Now it's come to the point where I'm only hitting it to a front pin.
Or if you have to go over a tree.
Yeah, of course.
Something unusual
An
like that.
obstacle.
Now, when you talk about abbreviation, we already talked about kind of your system. That's just one system. Anybody can come up with their own system.
Yes, it's all personalized.
I would say some people use where the club head is, where their hands is, the clock system, where their arm is. It could versus just, okay, that's 80 yards. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do, but I'm just gonna try to feel this one out. You're maybe against the 8 ball there,
For sure.
and might not have the consistency of where that ball's gonna go.
And Andy, I've even seen some professional golfers, maybe on the mini tours or up in Canada, who didn't have the system in place.
Right.
And it hurt them a lot, especially when wind got into play.
Oh, yeah.
I would get up to a really windy hole, we're in a similar spot, kind of 80 to 100 yards out, and those guys didn't know how to hit this shot, but I did, and it gave me a big advantage over those other players.
Absolutely. Now, was there any certain feels that you had, coming through the shot when it comes to the shorter follow through, more abbreviation?
For sure, I tried to match up whatever the backswing was, I tried to match it up on the follow through as
Show
well.
what that would look like.
Yeah, so if I went, this is a 54 degree, if I want to hit this 85 yards, I would take this back to my pec with my hands and kind of on the other pec on the way through, okay? So this is kind of what it's going to look like. This is my 85-yard shot, and I hit it to within a few yards every time if I hit it solid. Okay, so that would be pec to pec. I would hit it 85 yards, nice spin, hopefully pretty close.
So you match up the pec to pec so you have balance
Correct.
on both sides of the swing. I think that's phenomenal. And let's just say you had to hit, let's say you wanted to hit one really low, you wanted to get to the back part of the green, but you wanted to skip back there a little bit. What kind of lofted club would you use from 100 yards if you wanted to kind of skip it to a very back hit?
I would take less loft, obviously, than what I had in that last swing. Maybe use a 50 degree or even a pitching wedge.
Okay. So see, a lot of people they're very surprised to hear pitching wedge ever even comes out. Because if you hit a pitching wedge full, you could hit it 145 to 50 yards.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about a shot that's 100 yards. So I think that is a big misnomer. A lot of good players are using a lot less loft than you think. And most of the time, they've got their own system, but they're matching it up on both sides. So, but I would say, setup-wise, there are a couple keys to the wedge game itself.
Yes.
So let's talk about a couple of keys that you do to hit, let's say, that 100-yard shot with a, I don't know, pitching wedge. Here, I'll put a pitching wedge in here.
Okay.
So what are a couple of differences in your setup that you might have compared to your full?
So I typically hit this club 140 yards, maybe 135, if I hit it completely full, which I rarely do nowadays. But what I would do, a few different setups from the 140-yard full shot to the 100-yard pitching wedge would be I would bring my feet a little closer together, get my lower body a little quieter, and I would stack a little bit more weight on my lead side and try to keep it there a little bit more. Kind of something looking like this, okay? And it almost feels like a long pitch in a way.
So that weight being, or your pressure being on your lead foot also allows the swing to be a little shorter.
It does.
So that can help you hit your position that you were looking, desiring to hit. So I think that's another thing that you're gonna notice with the really good players is they stay very centered on the style of shot. And they don't have a lot of movement. It's very refined and pretty small and abbreviated, like Chase was saying. Again, a hard part for most of the amateurs is staying on their lead foot.
Absolutely. They love to get that weight transferred over there.
So they tend to kind of feel like they need to get back here for the ball to go anywhere. But I tell you what, if you could just learn to kind of feel that weight on that lead foot, on the backswing, you'll be very surprised at the precision that you can do with your trajectory and your actual distance.
Couldn't agree more.
So hopefully this guys will help you and gals out with your wedge game. If you want to take some opportunities and turn them into birdies, this is the area you're going to have to spend some time on because it can change your game immensely.
Practice up, guys.